Michael, the bad boy of Knox County.
That's it. Yeah, I'm just moving fast and breaking things, as they say.
Disrupt.
Yeah, disrupt in education.
Oh, all right. Cool. We'll go Andrew and then Michael for the order.
Yes. Do not start with me for part one. I'm still looking some stuff up real quick.
We'll start with Michael. He can
The time machine.
He can wow us with Orson Welles' great grandson.
All right.
Here we go.
You said me first?
Yeah.
Okay.
In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 349 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford.
Michael O'Malley.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our music video series with 2003's, let me get it right, Interstella 5555.
Got it wrong last week.
5ecret star system. And the secret star system and all that is fives also, because
because why not?
Because they're French.
It's just like a Prince album, but with the fives, I guess.
We won't be mean to Daft Punk. They're broken up at the moment. So.
There are only 4 fives, though. It's always bothered me. There should be 5 of them.
That's true.
Am I wrong?
I don't really understand the significance of the fives, except that he's getting 5.
I don't either.
Isn't he? We can talk about this in part 2.
That
We'll
question
talk about
and
it.
More. I'm going to point at the screen. Well, let's go ahead and jump into. Oh, actually, let's promote our website. Promote our website. Cinematary.com. We got a new review, Silent Light, the 2007 film by Carlos Regatas. We got a new review by Nazi. I'm going to mess up your name. Nazi. I'm going to just call you Nazi. I don't want to just screw the whole thing up. But we have a new review up on that from a new writer. We also have the Justice League review and Bullet in the Head. And then we're going to have some good stuff coming up later this month. So be sure to check out cinematary.com. Also head over to the Patreon. We talked about it, but you have a nice pork adobo recipe for the Foods and Movies series that you can have access to if you are a patron to the Cinematary's Patreon.
And you have access to watching our live stream, which
I
don't know if anyone's doing right now, but you can do
you
that.
You can see Andrew in the dark with his face just like floating in a sea of blackness.
I like his the reflection in the microphone. So
you see 2 of me.
Yeah,
I didn't even notice that. That's a cool little visual Easter egg.
It's like a Hype Williams video.
Yeah, it is. Get real close.
There you go. Well, let's go ahead and do movies that we saw this week in part 1, and I'm going to lead it off with Michael. You're going to take us back in time.
Well, there's not too much back in time in this movie. I had a really terrible day today, and I came home and I was like, I just want to be brain dead for an hour and a half. And so I picked, I went on Canopy, and I used actually a Canopy watch credit to do this.
You went to Canopy to watch a dumb movie?
I'm shocked this movie is on Canopy.
Yeah.
I went to Canopy to watch a movie, and this is the movie I ended up watching on Canopy.
So you're like, these Canopy movies look too intellectually stimulating for me right now.
That was exactly it.
After the 6th Holocaust documentary, you're like, I don't know.
So I ended up watching 2002's The Time Machine, which is based on a novel by H.G. Wells, a pretty famous novel, and directed by the great-grandson of H.G. Wells, which is kind of fun. Apparently, the great-grandson of H.G. Wells didn't understand the book very well because this movie is dumb as rocks, and the novel is not, which I can get to in a second. But so this takes place in like the late 1800s, I think like 1899 or something. Yeah, 1899. And so this doctor is just like poor. He's like a inventor, like mad scientist type dude, like like academic, who's just like pouring his life's work into just like experimental mechanics and physics. And he's also like in love with this woman, and this woman gets killed in like a mugging in the park one night. And then it's unclear to me if he had been already researching this, or if this incident inspired him to research this. But right after she dies, it flashes to 4 years later, and he's invented a time machine because he's going to go back in time. And
how do you invent a time machine? You simply invent a time machine in the future, and then you'll be able to go back in time.
Like the interesting part, though, like why would you fast forward to that?
I will say, like, the book itself basically does that same thing, where it presupposes that he is able to invent a time machine, because as may surprise you, but science has not yet figured out how to go back or forward in time in a way that's different from how we experience it. So I don't know that H.G. Wells was capable of figuring that out either. So he just kind of was like, well, this guy invents a time machine. And so like the movie basically does the same thing, except in the book, he's just like interested in science, because it's like a really early sci-fi novel. And so everything's got to be like, amazing science. But this one, the guy's got to have a motive or something. So his motive is he's going to go back in time and stop the shooting of his wife. So he goes back in time. He goes back in time and stops the shooting of his wife. But then his wife like walks across the street and gets hit by a carriage and dies. Sorry, it's not his wife; it's his girlfriend. But
so is it that there's no way that he can stop her from dying? Like whatever he does, her death will happen immediately after. Is that the plot of the movie?
So I was really hoping that was going to be the plot of the movie, and the entire movie was going to be her dying like 1,000 times.
Oh, no.
But that's not
life's purpose.
That's not it. So after that, he like goes into the future somehow, because he's like, I got to get answers in the future when people have figured out this time travel thing about like how to save someone back in time. So he goes into the future, and in the future he goes into the New York Public Library, and there's like a hologram librarian that he talks to, who basically is like, sorry, dude, you can't change the past. Like that's a principle that we've realized. And so he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go into the future. So he goes further into the future, where apparently humanity decides to blow up the moon. And so when they blow up the moon, when they blow up the moon, all the moon rocks like come crashing down and like destroy civilization. And so he's like, well, that's not a good...
I can't stand the fucking moon.
And so he's like, well, that's not going to work. And so he goes further into the future. Actually, what happens is he gets hit in the head with one of these moon rocks and like falls on the lever on the time machine unconscious. And so he like goes some unknown time to the future. It's like 800,000 years later. And by that time, like human society has reconstructed itself, and basically like human evolution has diverged. And so you have like a literal lower class that is underground. And then you have this kind of like effect, like class of like kind of elf-looking creatures who live above the ground, and like the creatures underground will come and steal the people from above the ground. And
where do the elf creatures come from?
Well, it's a divergent human evolution. So like the idea in the book is that
wife die again in the future, because that'd be fucking hilarious.
So he gets another girlfriend in the future. The screenplay kind of she gets captured at one point and almost dies, and he has to save her. The screenplay kind of forgets about his first lady, but so everything I've told you about him going back in time to save his girlfriend or whatever is not present in the book. What is present in the book is he goes into the future, and these two races or species of humans have like diverged, right? And H.G. Wells' point, H.G. Wells being a socialist, his point was that like the material conditions of like human society like impact like people's behavior, and so he was.
H.G. Wells was a socialist.
Yeah, he was. And I mean,
as was Jack London. Apparently, you're just bringing all the moldy, dusty classics into new focus.
You bet. Yeah, I'm all for that. I mean, it's a little bit problematic. Like, there's like a little bit of like, I mean, it's literal social Darwinism, like what he like is suggesting here. But the basic idea was like a class analysis, wherein like industry and like the conditions of the lower class became so bad that like human evolution literally diverged and their class warfare became entrenched in racial warfare. And the book's kind of interesting in that. In the movie, the underclass is just bad. They're just bad guys. And the movie actually ends with a genocide. They blow up literally all the underclass and save the other people. And then he goes back.
And that's a happy ending?
That's the happy ending. And he realizes at the end, like, well, I can't change the past, but at least I've got this sweet girlfriend here in the future. So I'm going to stay in the future and live with my sweet girlfriend.
Well, that's
good.
You get his dick.
So like,
that's what matters.
Yeah, kind of misses the point of like the subtext of the novel, which is like fine.
Wait, have you looked into the politics of H.G. Wells's great grandson? Is he like a conservative? That would be really interesting.
I have no idea. I didn't know that this was directed by his great grandson until I turned on the movie, and then I was like opening Wikipedia as the movie was playing. But what is interesting is like for the first like, so when he's going back in time to like save his wife and like trying to figure out all this, like it's goofy, but it's also like kind of like it's like a thinking man's Goofy movie, you know, at the beginning, because it's kind of like about
to be confused with the Goofy movie,
right?
Or the extremely goofy movie.
This is this rounds out the sequel or the trilogy, and so it's like a little bit goofy, but it's also like, you know, kind of like lightly thoughtful about like grief and what it means to truly like deal with the fact that like loved ones die and stuff like that. So like for about 20 minutes it's that, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good, even though it's a little bit like schlocky. But then it just becomes entirely schlocky and a little bit genocidal at the end, and then forgets all the interesting thematic groundwork at the beginning, and just becomes really dumb.
This guy also directed Mars Needs Moms.
Wow.
I just thought everyone should know.
That's beautiful. I'm glad he finds work.
Wait, he also did The Prince of Egypt? Hold on.
Wait, what?
So he co-directed The Prince of Egypt with Brenda Chapman from Brave.
Okay.
But you know, left to his own devices, he makes Mars Needs Moms and this apparently.
Anyway, at any rate, I wouldn't recommend using a Canopy stream credit on this. It is kind of like this strikes me as like
you sound like a Lane on Seinfeld.
It's not sponge-worthy, yeah.
Is it Canopy-worthy? I don't know.
I will say that like for people who enjoy like, you know, those kind of like 90s like The Mummy or like the Paul W.S. Anderson movies that were happening in the 90s, like it's got that vibe to it, I think. And it doesn't feel like this commodified like slick product. I mean, it kind of does, but it has like these weird like dysfunctional elements of it that like I think some people kind of are nostalgic for in 90s blockbusters, even though this isn't a 90s blockbuster. So it's an early 21st century blockbuster, but it has the feel of like that wave of like 90s blockbusters that people are a little bit nostalgic for now that we have like the uber competence of like the MCU or whatever.
Well, the
so
MCU,
if you're like
they're getting rid of VFX, you know, Chloe Zhao's leading the way, you know.
They're using cameras now.
They're using Brave New World
instead of computers. So it's
a
big
world.
It's a big world.
So anyway, I mean, if you're into that vibe, like that's kind of going on in this movie. It's not good, but it's also not good in ways that movies don't tend to not be good anymore. So
honestly, I would have watched it if you told me the girlfriend died in the future also, because that'd been hilarious.
I really was going to be all on board with like, this is a movie in which like it's just a Sisyphean task to save his girlfriend the entire time, and I think that would have been like unintentionally hilarious. And it's not that, unfortunately. Although Simon Wells, if you're listening, I would contribute to a GoFundMe, Kickstarter or whatever, for that movie. If you're looking for work after Mars Needs Moms. So
we got to ask some questions about your political views first, though.
Yeah, we
got to vet you.
Yeah, true.
Clear that out.
True. Maybe read some of your great grandfather's novels.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of him, H.G. Wells.
Yeah. He's kind of a big deal.
Oh, really? All right, Andrew, I'm gonna toss it over to you.
Sure. I would like to talk about a great movie called Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I imagine that most listeners are familiar with Elvira, the actress slash personality slash character. I am not super familiar with her. My exposure to her is like through cultural osmosis and also this movie. But the short version that as far as I understand it, is that she was a host of like a kind of like a mystery science theater like television program where people watched kind of schlocky bad horror movies, and she would punctuate it with her commentary. I'm not sure if the commentary was throughout the movie or after the movie ended. In this movie, you see her doing that twice, two different ways. But I guess when the run of the TV show ends, she is able to make this movie, or this movie is made for her, as kind of like a one last send off to the character, I guess. And it's an interesting meta thing where Elvira is like, we're not really following the character Elvira, we're following the person who plays Elvira, but the twist is that she's just like Elvira all the time in real life, and she just like kind of acts and feels like she's from another planet, and it's just kind of like a constant fish out of water situation with like her trying to interact with like the buttoned up civilized, like polite society, right? And I guess the basic plot of the film is that she loses her job, or she quits her job because the director or the CEO of her television company makes an unwanted sexual advance at her. And that is like a theme that kind of comes up throughout the movie, like men being creepy and handy with her, and her kind of like very aggressively rejecting that and pushing back. So it's kind of like a proto Me Too movie in a way. It came out in 1988. But she loses her job. She wants to get a job in Las Vegas doing like a song and dance show. But she gets stranded in a town because her car breaks down and she needs a bunch of money. And the town is like super like straight-laced and puritanical conservative. And that is like like her presence is a problem for them just because of how like tempting, I guess, they think of her as being. And so the basic conflict of the movie is like Elvira is hot, right? And like Elvira being hot kind of poses problems from two different angles. On the one hand, you have really creepy dudes trying to like cross boundaries and like do things against her will. And on the other hand, you have like really puritanical people who are attempting to shame her for her sexuality and the way that she presents. So it's I would say it is actually a very interesting feminist movie about the intersection of those two things. Like I've often thought about like modern feminism as like, and like its relationship to quote unquote objectification as being kind of a war on two fronts, where you're fighting against the tendency to, the conservative tendency to try to like control women's sexuality and like repress women's sexuality and like make women cover up and like blame women for tempting men. And then on the other hand, you have the fetishization and the ogling and the unwanted sexual advances that come along with that objectification. And this movie is like sitting very firmly in between those things and saying like, hey, both of these things are bad, and women can present sexually and be sexual beings and like the way their body looks and want to accentuate it without necessarily like inviting like judgment or unwanted advances or whatever. And like that was like the organic thought that I was having while watching the movie, and I was shocked, maybe not that shocked, to like go on Letterboxd and see basically all of the reviews are people either drooling over Elvira or kind of like criticizing the movie because they think the movie is drooling over Elvira. Like there's one particularly, I would say, egregious review that I'm just going to read in full. It's not very long, but it's by a Letterboxd reviewer named Dave Taylor. Putting you on blast. Dave.
Damn.
Uh-oh, Dave.
He says,
Cinematary fans coming for you.
He's about to get swarmed by all the Cinematary fans. He said, in honor of International Women's Day, I present to you Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, a movie whose sole purpose seems to be to put 13-year-olds through puberty. Ask anyone who has fleeting knowledge of Elvira. They can probably tell you these 3 things. 1, she's got big tits. 2, she makes corny jokes about cheesy horror movies. And 3, did I already mention her tits? That's pretty much all the filmmakers knew as well. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If your idea of a climactic ending is Elvira showing off her skills with titty tassels, then this movie is definitely for you. So this is not like the most judgy review in the world, but I definitely think this review completely misses the point of what this movie is trying to do, like top to bottom. And so I think
what that review reminds me of is that part in Lady Bird where that dude is criticizing Lady Bird for having only greatest hits. And she's like, well, why? They're the greatest.
They're the greatest. Or the drama teacher at the end of the play sitting in resignation saying they didn't understand it. Yeah. So very smart, interesting, complicated movie, but it's also like really funny and really fun. It's one of those movies kind of like Airplane or something where literally every line is a joke. Most of those jokes are double entendres. Part of Elvira's like feeling like an alien from another planet is that like she seems to be on one level like unaware of the fact that everything that comes out of her mouth is like accidentally a sexual innuendo. Like there are definitely moments where she means to do it. Like there's a moment where it's like she hits her head on something and somebody asks her, how's your head? And she says, well, I've never gotten any complaints yet. And that's obviously like meant to be a joke. But there are other moments like where she's talking to kids, like school-aged kids. They're like working on like building a house together. And she tells this like young boy, like just she's like bent over, you know, in like a sexual position while she's like working on this house. She says, just grab a tool and start banging to this kid. Like she seems to not even be cognizant of the fact that happens. And so like a lot of the humor of the movie comes from that. I will also say that I don't want to spoil what happens in this movie. There are a lot of great things that happen in this movie, just like turns that are taken that you're like, is this movie really going to do that? And then it does. And one of the things is that she, I guess this is kind of a spoiler, but it's a great spoiler. She accidentally like makes a horny potion that is like that is given out at like this church potluck or something. No, it's not the church potluck, because like this movie in the weird conservative town that she's stranded in, religion like weirdly doesn't exist, but everybody's a member of like the morality club and they're interested in policing everyone's morality. And like at this morality club potluck, she brings this casserole that she thinks is going to turn into a monster, but it actually accidentally makes everyone like, you know, irrepressibly horny. And then they start making the accidental double entendres too. And it's just really funny and really, really wacky and really smart. And I had such a great time. Jesse had such a great time too. Like the entire time we were watching it, you know, every 5 minutes or something, Jesse would be like, I love her. She's amazing. She's the best. How can I be more like her? So, aspirational cinema here. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Well, it's aspirational unless you're Dave Taylor.
Unless you're Dave Taylor.
That's true. Well, I'm going to not call this aspirational cinema, and that is Spike Lee's Bamboozled. It's the opposite.
Certainly not.
It's that.
Do not do this.
Do not do this.
Yeah, this is.
Well, Bamboozle, it just got a Criterion just kind of re-released it, and they put it on the Criterion channel. So this was the first time I'd watched it. I'm mainly going to use this to just talk about Spike Lee, I'll be honest, because I like Spike Lee a lot.
He's great.
He's great. But if you've never seen Bamboozled, it came out in 2000, and it follows a character played by Damon Wayans named Pierre Delacroix.
Really bizarre performance, by the way, I will say.
I kind of love it though. It's pretty
No,
great.
yeah, it works in the movie, I think, but it is a performance.
He's playing like a mad scientist character.
Yeah.
It's like a Frankenstein riff.
It is. It's pretty wonderful. But he is like
he was in like the 1930 James Whale Frankenstein, but he's in a movie from like 2000.
But he's like supposed to be a real person in 2000.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's a television producer, and I think it takes place. I guess it is like the movie came out in 2000. I guess it takes place, in the present day or whatever. But they make reference to it being like a new millennium. Anyway, so he plays a television producer, and there's the executive at the TV network that he works at, played by Michael Rappaport, says that he wants something. He wants something more black. He wants him to do like a TV show that's much more black than he's been giving him. And so Pierre comes up with literally a 21st century minstrel show starring a couple of street performers who he knows from outside the building, and he thinks that he's going to create this whole minstrel show and it's going to get him immediately fired so then he can just get out of this contract and everything. But instead it becomes a massive hit, and it becomes like this giant cultural phenomenon where, late in the film you watch as like they're having tapings of the show, and like the entire studio audience is also in blackface along with the characters on stage, watching along. And then you also have Jada Pinkett Smith plays the assistant of Pierre. But yeah, so I was overall like it's very much like.
Hey Zach, we lost you for a second there. All right, you're muted.
Okay, I can't hear you.
Oh no. This is the beauty of the live stream, people.
I disconnected my mic.
Oh, okay. He's back.
We're good. Let me get this recording going.
I don't remember what the first half of your sentence was before you got cut off.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I was talking about Spike. So it's a messy movie, which it seems to be like kind of. I don't know. There's a lot of Spike Lee movies that are relatively messy, and
he loves mess.
He loves mess, and so this is what I want. So this is mainly what I wanted to talk about with Spike Lee. He has messy movies, but I kind of love that about him because, like, honestly, would you want to like? I would rather watch a messy Spike Lee movie with with some interesting ideas that he's kind of flirting with, that he doesn't fully get across the finish line with. Something, you think of like the Five Bloods and Chirac, like they're like he presents really interesting ideas, and he doesn't 100% get fully like come to terms with them, but he like presents them and I'm like, that's kind of interesting, and he moves on to something else. But it's messy, and I like that. I would rather watch that than watch like Darkest Hour, which I would like to puke on Darkest Hour.
Zach, you should really test this thesis by watching She Hate Me, which is probably the messiest of the messy Spike Lee movies.
All right.
Yeah,
it is wild. That movie is wild.
Can you describe the scene in She Hate Me?
The scene that you'll probably see screen capped is oh man, I'm forgetting who the main actor is, but it's Anthony Mackie.
Mackie.
Oh wow.
The plot involves him like creating a business in which he will like basically impregnate women. And so like there's like a montage of him having sex with a bunch of women, and then it's like intercut by these like CGI like sperm like
with Anthony Mackie's face on
it. with Anthony Mackie's face like superimposed on him.
That's the kind of
that's just the tip of the iceberg, man. Like that movie is out there.
But
it's like Bamboozled, but less good.
Okay. No, I'll put that. I just looked at it. It's on Hulu. I'm going to watch that now.
Do it.
But no, like I think he gets knocked for it. Like I was listening to a lot of people talking about like The Five Bloods, which is a movie. Again, it's super messy. I liked it a lot because I think it like does pose like a lot of different ideas that were interesting. But I feel like it's generally just with Spike Lee that people kind of go, oh, well, it's messy and it doesn't come together, and that's kind of like a knock against the movie.
That was me. I said that.
Yeah, well, we're gonna blast. Let's blast Andrew real quick. But I don't know. I'm just gonna make a giant claim and say that there's a little bit of a racial component to it. Like, if again, let me just blast Joe Wright for a second with The Darkest Hour. Like, nobody's sitting there blasting Joe Wright for messy movies, you know, or that he makes messy movies. But Spike Lee, it's constantly like a thing around him.
I will say a better person to evoke is Martin Scorsese, who spent most of the 2000s making like messy movies, right? And also the 80s, you know, but like people love that shit. Like The Aviator, that is a messy movie. It's a big, sprawling movie with lots of big ideas.
Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York, yeah. And people approach these movies with a lot of reverence that they don't with Spike Lee movies. I mean, Spike Lee is well regarded, but he also has that like reputation as like a artistically problematic because he can't like sit still on like a single theme.
Well, he's also abrasive, and I think that's kind of the thing is that he's not like just kind of going, here's my idea, and like walking away. It's more like, there's my idea. Yeah. And I think that's probably the reason also is that people don't like he tosses this idea out there and it kind of punches the person in the face and they kind of respond in a negative manner to that.
Punched in the face by Anthony Mackie's sperm.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, I liked Bamboozle. It I don't know if it totally coalesces. It is kind of fun, like in just like it's very rambly. There's a lot of rambliness to it, and I like that about it. And also, like, you know, there's the meme format where people were saying that like somebody understood the assignment, and Michael Rappaport absolutely understood the assignment and then took that assignment and made that his life creed for the rest of his life, because he's like the character he plays in Bamboozle, either Spike Lee knew that and was like, LOL, I'm gonna do this, or Michael Rappaport just was like, this was really fun, let me just do this for the rest of my life.
So I actually am not super familiar with Michael Rappaport or his personal life or whatever. So what are you referring to here?
He feels very comfortable with his relationship to the African American community.
Gotcha.
Like if you listen to like him talk about stuff, he has a podcast and he has other stuff that he talks on. He's very comfortable. Like he feels like because he can talk extensively about like rap and hip hop or basketball or other subjects that are predominant, that you would associate predominantly with the African American community.
Yeah. That,
like the character in this movie, he can just drop the N-word. So yeah, he's a little bit. He's a little bit of a question mark, but I'm just saying he like if anybody out of the whole meme format understood the assignment in the movie, it was Michael Rappaport.
He directed a documentary about a tribe called Quest. I guess that's what you mean.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, but Bamboozled, it's on Criterion Channel, but it's running out at the end of April. So if you listen to this on Friday when this episode comes out, that's the only day you can watch it, and it's gone forever.
But She Hate Me is still on Hulu. So.
It's still on Hulu. So watch She Hate Me and watch Anthony Mackie in that, you know, as Sperm instead of Anthony Mackie and whatever the fuck that Captain America bullshit show is. So,
oh yeah, don't watch that.
Yeah, watch any Spike Lee movie over that for sure.
Well, I was thinking like also like Spike Lee has such cool 2000s era movies. Like I was thinking also about like 25th Hour,
this is his
Inside Man.
Movie.
Yeah, this movie like has that like, you know, early digital look to it.
Yeah, I want to.
I would say like to go back to the messiness thing. You know, Spike Lee has movies that feel very neat, like 25th Hour or Crooklyn or Do the Right Thing. Yeah. She's Got to Have It. Mm-hmm. And then he has movies that are really messy, like this or She Hate Me or Chirac or Defy Bloods. Mm-hmm. I would say this is the best messy Spike Lee movie. of
I
the ones
agree.
that I've seen. It's the one that has packs the most punch. It feels the most powerful, and a lot of that has to do with the closing montage.
Oh, that montage at the end is very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it also it's messy, but he also kind of starts and ends his ideas. Well, it's a little bit more coalesced than like those other movies you talk about. So
yeah, a lot of the ideas are like in the same orbit of one another in this movie. It's like it's also like maybe arguably his angriest movie. It is like it is like just like a really like just like fiery, like just simmering rage kind of movie. Like some of those scenes with the performances are just searing. Just how much like there is just this feeling of like just anger at the entire like establishment that like pushes performers into these positions, like these degrading positions. Like it's it's like extremely potent as far as like satire goes, and I think that a lot of Spike Lee movies have that kind of emotional momentum to them that also makes them really compelling in a way that like maybe some people discount when they talk about like the logistics of the plot and how they don't always like fit together. And I think like to your point, Andrew, like one of the reasons why this movie does feel like it works as well as it does is because like just the emotional momentum that builds up like over the course of this movie is really monumental.
Yeah, that's a great word for it.
Yeah. So high recommend on Bamboozled. We don't really have much time. I also watched like technically kind of like a double feature of this and Bullworth, which is also another messy movie.
It's a good double feature with.
Yeah, it's a great. Honestly, stumbled into an amazing double feature of Bullworth and Bamboozled. So high recommend, especially.
We've talked about Bullworth enough times that listeners should know you should watch Bullworth if you.
It's on. Well, it's on Hulu now. So so like do a double feature of Bullworth and Bamboozled, then watch She Hate Me. There you go.
It's a good run there.
There you go. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and we will be back to talk about Interstella 5.5.5.5. The story of the secret star system after this.
Wait, so
what ridiculous title?
What is up with the fives? Like, is there something I'm missing there?
I don't think so.
They're French. Whatever. What are you gonna do?
I mean, I don't know if I understand the story of the secret star system. To be honest, like there's something to do with that little guitar, like silhouette.
Isn't the guitar their spaceship or something?
Yeah,
it has a spaceship. Also, like some sort of like weird beam signal that like gets sent across the universe.
It's like the bat signal.
You know, they were blue.
On their fans.
They were blue and they weren't blue. You know, it just happens. It just happens.
Honestly, Andrew, I was watching this for like the first 15 minutes. I was like, this is just Trolls World Tour because they open with the same song, and then the creatures come in with the spaceship and capture take away their spark or whatever.
That's how Trolls World Tour could be improved if it just like played the rest of Discovery.
Please, yeah, get on this, DreamWorks.
A lot of trolls love on Cinematary.
I like the first one.
We know.
Talk to that. Yeah,
I'm
on the record. I'm on the record as a Trolls 1 fan.
Oh. Speaking of animated, have you watched, Michael, the new Shaun the Sheep movie that silently came out last year? Yeah.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I love the first Shaun the Sheep movie, which I think is like that year it came out with like Mad Max Fury Road, and at the time I was like, this is on par with Mad Max Fury Road, and I maybe cooled just a tad on it, but I still think it's like one of the great like 21st century animated movies.
No, it's great. No, this one was it was kind of lame, to be honest.
Yeah, it was not. It was just a bunch of references. I feel like Aardman Animation is losing it. Like I have not seen one of their movies in a long time that felt like it was great. And for a while, like when I was younger, like I watched so much Aardman Animation, like Wallace and Gromit and like all that stuff.
There was also What was the caveman soccer one? Nobody liked?
First man, or early man.
Early man. Yeah.
Early man.
Not
Yeah.
First man
not
is
great.
the Neil Armstrong.
First
Yeah.
man.
Early man was not great. I'm trying to think what they had before that. The last one I remember really liking was the Wallace and Gromit feature, the Were-Rabbit one.
We should do a Aardman series.
I love Aardman. They've got some really interesting shorts too, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, because
Like,
we could do like a little shorts program and then some other features.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I co-sign that.
Live streamers, let us know if you'd like to see that. In the
All
comments.
0 of you.
All right, you guys ready? Talk about some Daft Punk.
So ready.
Yeah.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome back to part 2 of episode 349 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be talking about Interstella 5555, the story of the secret star system. And the story secret star system are all 5s as well because they're French and they're pretentious.
Do all of those words start with S in French? Because how do the 5s work?
I mean, this is an American film, right? Like it's a Japanese-American collaboration.
I thought it was a French
Japanese collab. Yeah,
I'm going to Google Translate.
But I will say though that like the lyrics on Discovery are all in English, and so it would make sense for the title to be in English as well.
True.
Hold
on. We're going to Wikipedia.
All right, we'll go to Wikipedia.
You go on with your fact sheet there, Zach. I'll be back with my fact sheet after you're done.
I think it is a French-Japan.
There'll be a nice little overlap because there's some Wikipedia on my fact sheet.
Okay.
So the film's directed by Kazuhisa Takanouchi, who I looked up, did a lot of Dragon Ball Z. So shout out to DBZ, baby. And the film was stars and was written and produced by Daft Punk. So the idea of making a feature film to visualize Discovery came about during the album's early recording sessions. Daft Punk's concept for the story involved the merging of science fiction with entertainment industry culture. The duo had initially conceived of a live-action film featuring themes of overcoming oppression and rebelling against the machinery of life. After the live-action approach was discarded, several styles of animation were considered before settling on that of Daft Punk's childhood hero, Leiji Matsumoto. The film's concept was further developed with Daft Punk collaborator Cedric Hervet, and the script was brought to Tokyo in July of 2000 in hopes of creating the film with Matsumoto, who remarked that he in turn was inspired by French filmmakers. After Matsumoto joined the film,
I'm looking at Matsumoto's Wikipedia page. He was also inspired by one H.G. Wells.
Oh my God! Simon Wells, are you taking notes? we want anime time travel where the girlfriend keeps dying.
Honestly, that'd be my. Is it that? I think that's already happened, but yeah, I want that again. So after Matsumoto, the H.G. Wells fan, joined the team as a visual supervisor, Shinji Shimizu had been contacted to produce the animation with Takanouchi to direct the film. And these were all Dragon Ball Z people.
There's also some Evangelion people on board as well.
There you go. It's all the things. Daft Punk commuted to Tokyo on a nearly monthly basis to produce the storyboards, and the film cost about $4 million. The first 4 episodes of the film were shown on Cartoon Network in August of 2001 during the Toonami Midnight Run Special Edition. Cartoon Network later hosted the episodes online as part of their short-lived Toonami Reactor project, later revived as Toonami Jetstream. I just like that we got a lot of Toonami references in this episode.
Agreed.
And then in 2003, the BBC said this remarkable collaboration between legendary Japanese animator Leiji Matsumoto and Parisian techno gurus Daft Punk is a visual and oral treat of intergalactic proportions. So, on that
fact sheet number 2.
Okay.
So the original, actually, no, I'm going to start with this fact. If you translate "Story of the Secret Star System" into French,
it's all
those words do start with S, except the word "story," which is written like the word "history," starts with an H. So wouldn't make sense to put a 5 there. The 5 is only there because they had to translate it into English, and I guess they thought it would be cool to change all the 2s to 5s. So I guess if we're confused about why the 5s are there, it doesn't make sense because it just doesn't make sense. However, the original title of the movie is not in French but Japanese, and the Japanese title translates to 4-5. That's all. 4-5. Which makes less sense to me.
Further, that explains
that one. Honestly, I like that one more.
Things.
I'm gonna call this 4-5 from now on.
Let's call it Interstella.
All right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about Interstella. I guess I don't know about Michael. Are you a Daft Punk person too? I know Andrew loves Daft Punk. Okay.
I mean, less so than Andrew, I'm sure, but I like Daft Punk.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like Daft Punk? Honestly,
because I'm ready to.
One of the most universal bands I feel like of the 21st century is Daft Punk.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, give us a little primer on Daft Punk, and I guess is Discovery. Where does Discovery rank for you?
I mean, Daft Punk, they only have 4 albums. They put their albums out with a lot of time between them. And I would argue that their first 3 albums are all masterpieces in their own right. They're doing very different things. And their 4th album, Random Access Memories, is probably their biggest hit at this point, but it feels kind of like a victory lap. Like they're not doing a lot new on that record. It feels like they're just kind of making a greatest hits compilation of the different sounds they've been famous for over the years. But yeah, super influential French house duo with crossover success in America and I guess Japan as well. They are a group that is very important to me because they were my first exposure to electronic music, which is probably, if not my favorite genre of music, among my favorite genres of music. I make some electronic music, electronic/ambient music. And so they were a huge gateway to so many artists and styles of music that I was just completely unfamiliar with. And the way that I was introduced to Daft Punk was actually Interstella, because I remember seeing Cartoon Network, or I guess Toonami specifically, playing the first episode of Interstella, which was just the One More Time music video. And just I don't remember it being presented as some sort of special event. I remember it just kind of coming on between shows with no explanation. And I was like, what was that? I had no frame of reference for any of this. I mean, I was familiar with anime, of course, because Pokemon had been a thing in my life for the past 3 years or so at that point. But this was, even more of just I feel in that era, the Toonami era, there were a lot of kids, I guess specifically a lot of white boys who just had their brains popped open by a lot of the things they were seeing on TV. I was just so far outside the purview of day-to-day existence, right? And so I didn't watch Interstella, the movie, until many, many years later in high school when I became friends with somebody who was a Daft Punk mega fan and got me even more into Daft Punk, introduced me to Daft Punk's best album, which is their live album, Alive 2007. Also, while I'm just ranting about Daft Punk, so Daft Punk has 2 live albums, Alive 1997 and Alive 2007. And I hear Alive 2007 in high school, and it's the greatest piece of live music I've ever heard. It's still the greatest piece of live music I've ever heard. And I'm in high school looking at this they toured in 1997, they toured in 2007. Where am I going to be in life in 2017? And I did the math on that, and I was in 2017, I'm going to be out of college. I'm going to have a professional job. I'm going to have some money saved up. I am dedicating my life to seeing Daft Punk play in 2017. I will pay thousands of dollars. I will cross oceans to see Daft Punk play in 2017. And you know what? They just didn't tour in 2017. They just didn't do it. Even though they like had a very recent album at that point, they could have done it. And now they're broken up, and it's sad, but I guess it's it's what needed to happen because they probably didn't have a whole lot else to say with their music. That was kind of evident by, the retread that was Random Access Memories. So I guess I'm happy to see it end like on their terms, than them be kind of like drag it out for several albums with like some sort of record deal obligation as the characters in this movie are forced to for the first half. But that's just me ranting about Daft Punk. We should also talk about the movie, which I also think is great. But Michael, Zach, you guys can take over.
Well, they deal with a pretty universal situation, which is that they were on a planet and they were blue. And they're
Who can relate?
Yeah, exactly.
Dabba dee dabba die,
Yeah, and then they get abducted by a guy who is gonna take over the world by winning a bunch of Grammys.
The universe. He has a book that says like universe domination. Like he has a universe domination spell that I guess someone wrote down without using it themselves. Otherwise, they would be in control of the universe.
And I just why does he have to win music awards to take over the universe?
It's an allegory.
I mean, I think it's about how much Daft Punk hate the record industry, right?
Yeah.
Why does the record industry have to win all these awards that get them money?
Yeah.
I just read it as like, so this guy's in like an eyes wide shut like secret society that wins Grammys.
The Society of the Secret Star System. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's circle back around to
and they become blue again.
The fact that they're blue, they're kind of like racialized, right? You could make a connection to Bamboozled, which is kind of about how this like industry driven by like white capitalists are able to kind of exploit the image of African Americans to make themselves money. Very similar situation happening here. I mean, Daft Punk themselves are not black, of course, but house music comes from black communities. And like you could even look at Daft Punk as being, held up as like the poster child for this, like the whitewashed poster child of this genre, that has such like a cultural identity that kind of gets stripped away by the marketing industry and the record labels.
I will say like an interesting connection to Bamboozled is the concept of like minstrelry, right? Where like they become reduced to their, an exaggerated version of their heritage. Whereas in Interstella, their heritage is stripped away, right? And they're homogenized, which I think like when I hear musicians complain about the exploitative practices of the record industry, it's like homogenization is something that comes, you listen to like Pink Floyd's like Wish You Were Here or something like that. This idea that like, you just get fed through this machine and become like, just like everybody else, and it just chews people up. And I feel like this movie definitely fits in like that tradition for sure, of like the music industry being a homogenizing force that doesn't care for like human dignity or I guess blue alien dignity. Or
even like it homogenizes the culture of the audience, the people listening too, right? There's one thing that is probably an unintentional, this is the thought that I don't know if the filmmakers intended for me to have, but like at the end of the movie, when we have this celebratory finale, they've gone back to their home planet, but they're still able to make music and they're still able to be heard from people around the world. And you get these like this montage of people from different parts of the world, people in Japan, people in like an African country, people in like the Alps, all like listening to the Crescendolls, the Daft Punk analog band. Like in a way, like their culture is being stripped away there too, because it's all being like turned into like the global monoculture. But I guess in the world of the movie, it's at least on the band's terms. It's not the record label like forcing that to happen.
Right.
I wasn't prepared for the connection to Bamboozled to happen. Interstella 5555.
Well, we've now connected it to the Time Machine and Bamboozled.
Man, this whole episode's full.
Where's the Elvira connection? That's what we need now.
I mean, there's some close-ups of butts. I mean,
there's a lot of
close-ups.
close-up.
The Elvira connection there.
Yeah, and that one guy is super into the girl Christian doll. So
yeah.
Well, this is another interesting thing about the movie. For like, is in some ways this movie is a celebration of fandom because it's like the fan who achieves superpowers saves the day, right? Like, and then at the end of the movie, there is like the implication that this has all been a dream of a child who just really
he's the guy who called to release the Snyder Cut. You know, he saved the world.
Well, yeah, I guess in like 2003 or whenever, it was a much more innocent idea of like someone just really loves their own little niche of music and can really devote themselves to being that. And I think like in a post social media world, like there is a really nefarious element to that sort of fandom, but there's a sweetness to it in this movie, you know, where that feeling of, you know, this is, you kind of take ownership of liking a band because it's like your own little corner where you feel like that you find like significance and meaning. But yeah, I did think about that. I was like, in 2021, I don't know how I feel about like fans saving a band in the world.
And but also on on the flip side of the evil record label stuff, there's also kind of a purity and a sweetness to the way the film talks about music, which I think that's something that carries throughout Daft Punk's discography in their lyrics. You know, a lot of times their lyrics are just about how awesome music is. Like they just love music. And you definitely get that from Random Access Memories, which is like a love letter to all the music that inspired them. Their first album, Homework, there's a track that is literally just like listing names of people who inspired them. But like music is fundamentally something so different from like the industrial capitalist mode of production. Like it's very exploratory. It's very, it's like, it has a sense of play to it. Just kind of like playing around and seeing what happens and kind of like chasing the joy or the rush of like the way a certain thing sounds. And like I was, watching this movie again, kind of with fresh eyes for the first time since high school, I was able to kind of like notice a lot of profundity in it that I definitely didn't get before when I was just like, oh, cool, Daft Punk anime. Yeah, I love these things. But even like the first song, One More Time, which, you know, I've heard since I watched this on Toonami when I was like 9 years old. I never really thought about like the lyric music got me feeling so free, you know, that they are free. They have this like free liberated spirit when they are playing music, and that spirit is kind of crushed by the industry itself.
Well, and it's that specific song that wins them the Grammy, right? Or that is harvested, I guess, for the Grammy, like in the movie, which is like, yeah, exactly. But I think that is like the tension of pop music, right? Like, because pop music is based on like a mass culture, you have to have like, or at least as the way that it's set up currently, like in order to reach a mass culture, there has to be a massive like capital infrastructure that promotes that. And invariably, when artists get enough voice in that, they express discomfort with that. Like, I mean, most artists I've ever heard like talk about like their fame and the role of their music are at least a little bit uncomfortable with like the music industry. I mean, even someone who's like, as you know, even more entrenched in the music industry than Daft Punk, like Taylor Swift or someone who's thoroughly.
She's currently having to re-record all her albums because they were stolen from her by the music industry.
Right. Even like, you know, someone who in like purely like objective, like monetary terms has like thrived under like the like record label system. Like it speaks up pretty openly about like the exploitative practices of it. And I think like there is like always that really interesting tension. And I mean, the same thing goes for animation as well. Like, you know, animation that gets onto like, you know, mainstream enough to be like Cartoon Network or you know, Toonami screenings, you have to take place within this huge like infrastructure of like, you know, Time Warner, and like just the amount of labor that goes into creating like that specific kind of animation. I think there is a lot of like, you know, you sometimes think about like Disney or like even like Studio Ghibli and all that, and like a lot of those artists are pretty ambivalent about the systems in which they work. And so I think that there is a sort of like natural camaraderie of pop music and animation, because both of them are kind of, at least in the mainstream, premised on being complicit in like giant like, you know, exploitative systems.
And they
I think the
only
movie kind of
really
explains that.
they only really work as monoculture if they're like massively appealing. Like they trigger those like those feelings in like everybody's brain around the world. And so you have to kind of reduce it to a formula of like, well, what kind of music, what kind of harmonies, and what kind of chord progressions like are most likely to get people to that like serotonin rush of pop music, right? And so ironically, it kind of does become like a very industrialized cookie cutter thing. But I don't think that Daft Punk's music, even though Daft Punk's music is very poppy and very accessible, and like you said, Michael, nobody doesn't like Daft Punk as far as I know. It is pretty like complex and musically impressive, I would say. Especially, and I guess we can talk about like the way the interplay between the music and the animation. But I guess the sequence that impresses me the most, both musically and visually, is the transition from One More Time to Aerodynamic, which is just like such an interesting, complex, like propulsive song. And I think the way that the visuals work like in tandem with that song is amazing. Like it feels like you're getting that Dark Side of the Rainbow moment all the time, because of course the visuals were made for the album, but it makes you think that like maybe the album was made for the visuals too. Like did they you know, choose these track titles as they were going along? Did they choose Crescendolls because they knew they wanted to create this fictional band called the Crescendolls? Like it all just kind of like works in sync so well.
I think that's like there's like, you know, the history of like visual albums or like albums that have tie-in movies and all that. And you know, like you have like The Wall or like Quadrophenia or Tommy or like those sorts of things. And a lot of those were either explicitly conceived as stories, you know, like a rock opera or something, or were conceived in tandem with a visual piece like The Wall, which even prior to the movie, like had the visual of the tour that was supposed to tie into the album and stuff. And I don't know enough about the production of Discovery, and it's lyrically sparse enough that it's hard to tell if there's any sort of like real concept at play there. But I do think that that's really interesting. This like the idea of like an album only fully makes sense when it is contextualized within another medium. You know, like one we'll talk about next, or 2 weeks from now, I guess, is Lemonade. You know, that's another album that like if you solely listen to the album, you can pick out threads. But watching the visual album component definitely makes it feel much more of a piece. And like, I mean, that I'd say that's like 100% true of this one, you know, which the album is great, but in a lot of ways, like Discovery is kind of like a party album. You know, I've never really thought about it very much. But watching this, which I didn't actually see back in Cartoon Network, this was my first time seeing this. I did start trying to think back. I'm like, so is this album actually about this? And like it does like make the album more interesting. It makes like layers peel back, because like you said, like some of the stuff that in the context of just kind of listening and vibing to the album just feel like, you know, oh hey, we're just having a good time, like do take on like larger significance with that. And like I don't know, just it is. I mean, I've heard Discovery so many times. Like, it was the first Daft Punk music I ever heard. And a bunch of those songs, like, just feel like they're hardwired into my brain. Like, I don't remember the first time I heard One More Time. Or, like, they just are songs that, like, for me, always seem to have existed. But now seeing the movie has, like, peeled back layers for songs that like honestly like I didn't think I could you know, feel differently about at this point, which is
and
interesting.
there are definitely songs on Discovery that are like not highlights, right? Like you have songs like Superheroes or songs like Short Circuit.
Yeah,
that,
Short Circuit was the
you know, when you're listening to the album, like, I want to skip that one so I can get to, you know, I want to get to what's the like really smooth like romantic song? I can't think of it.
Is it Face to Face?
No. It doesn't matter. But anyways, in the context of the movie where these songs are like functioning as scores for scenes, they work so well. Like the superheroes scene where like fanboy like falls out of the sky, and also the lyric, the loop is something's in the air, and like literally he's up there like falling into this stadium. Like it all works so well in that context. But Zach, I'm kind of curious to hear from you a little bit more, because I have no idea what your familiarity with this movie is or what you're familiar with Daft Punk is. So how did you respond to this?
I hate Daft Punk.
We found him.
No, I like Daft Punk. Let me just like look the street sweeper drive by. No, I like Daft Punk. This was the first time I ever saw this, though. I'm not super. Really, probably the first time I engaged with Daft Punk was the Tron Legacy soundtrack.
There's also that. Yeah,
I think that's kind of an entry point for a lot of people. And so like this was pretty. Since that's kind of my entry to Daft Punk, this was kind of a natural fit for that. You know, to me, a lot of the I think I agree. Like the fact that it's kind of set up almost like this, like a score for the scenes happening, makes it seem like it you know, I don't know. Like I guess I really haven't engaged with this soundtrack, or not this soundtrack, this album specifically, just on its own, like kind of listening to it. Broken away. I mean, I've heard a lot of these songs before, like One More Time and a number of the other tracks like in this, but I don't think I've ever sat and like listened to it divorced from the visuals. And so really I don't have anything that's like insightful to say other than like what it did in terms of like working with what was happening on screen, because that's kind of like that's my relationship with the album, at least to this point.
How do y'all feel like it works as like a piece of animation? You know, if this doesn't have anything to do with Daft Punk, like would this be a great anime film?
I think like there is like when I watched this, like I got kind of a nostalgia rush, because this is a kind of animation that, I mean, obviously anime is still a big thing, but anime technologically has moved past like this specific like aesthetic. And so like watching this like kind of flooded me back to, I didn't watch a ton of anime like on Cartoon Network, on Toonami and stuff like that, but I watched enough of it that like it feels grounded in a particular part of my life and like a particular like cultural era. And so like watching this again, like watching this kind of brought me back, like it feels of a piece with like specifically television anime. I think like what was going on in like film, like cinema, was a little bit different, but
what was happening with cinema?
Well, I don't know, whatever we're calling like, Ghost in the Shell and that sort of thing. But
no, I agree with you. I think like that's why like I mentioned at the top that like the guy who directed this did like a lot of Dragon Ball Z, because that's what it reminds me a lot of, like Dragon Ball Z, of like Naruto, of Gundam, of like those kind of, like, honestly, the fact that it was on Toonami, on Cartoon Network, like makes total sense to me, because it feels very akin to a lot of those programs, and like the thing I always remember about especially like Dragon Ball Z, was I always loved how it would take like a week to get through like one battle. Like they would be like, these two people are these two guys are battling, and it wasn't like you knocked it out in an episode. It was like, no, it was like 6 episodes. It was a whole damn week. You get to come back every day and watch. And so I kind of like that this, this wasn't nearly like to that length, but it also kind of had like that.
It has a similar vibe where like each song is one plot point, right?
Yeah,
so
it just keeps going.
Something like a chase scene could last for 30 seconds in another movie, but it lasts for 4 minutes here because you have to fill up the full length of the Daft Punk song.
Well, it also feels like, it also feels like there's like at least 6 different endings. Like you could end this thing at 6 different, like it feels like in multiple different places. But it just kind of keeps going, and it's like, oh, okay.
I feel like it has a really nice, clean arc to it. It comes full. It's like the Joseph Campbell coming full circle. Like they're back at their home planet, playing for a crowd of fans again, like they were at the beginning. I don't know.
Well, but you have all the villains fall into the pit, or whatever. And they're like, yay, we can escape, and then they go, and then oh no, there's the spirit of the villain in the sky, and there's a lot of
there's that, yeah.
There's a lot of at the end of a Final Fantasy game where it's I've defeated the boss. Oh no, there's another stage.
That wasn't his final form.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, there's a lot of that.
I know. Well, that's what I was thinking a lot of, the end of Kingdom Hearts 2, where you beat up the boss, and then you keep fighting versions of the guy. You keep, and you're just when will he? But it's nope, you're fighting him as a human. Now you're fighting him as a giant flying dragon. Now you're fighting his clone, and you're just can I just fucking end? That's what this felt like, and I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it has a JRPG feeling to it for sure. Yeah.
Well, there's even an assembling of a party,
Oh yeah, I mean they have a little D&D campaign when they go to the mansion and they find the Lovecraftian cult in the basement. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just we're collecting Grammys, and you're yeah, okay.
It's fun. I like to think of the entertainment industry as an evil cabal, the QAnon-esque evil cabal of capitalists. Go. Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to talk about, just because this is a subject that we brought up, I think specifically in the first episode, but we talked a little bit about how music videos utilize science fiction. We talked a little bit about it in the first one. I don't think we talked about it too much. We talked a little bit about it in last week with the Hype Williams videos, but I feel like this really, I guess for y'all, what about, and I think we've touched on it, but what about this album and kind of what Daft Punk is doing? I guess why this angle? Because I mentioned in the notes, initially they were going to make a live action thing, and that seems kind of insane thinking watching this now. So I guess kind of the way that they did it, why does that make sense? It's this kind of sci-fi piece.
Well, I think that the album felt futuristic when it came out. I mean, everything about Daft Punk feels a little futuristic.
They wear fucking helmets. So.
There's always been a visual component of Daft Punk. It's not just, and we talked about this with Star Icons on the first episode of the series. People like Prince and Kate Bush and Madonna, they're not just selling their music, but they're also selling an image and a version of themselves, an aesthetic that accompanies the music. And Daft Punk's sense of aesthetic and visual presentation has always been so strong and so pronounced. They wait 10 years to do a live tour, and they do a live tour from the inside of this giant glass pyramid that is doing crazy laser light stuff from the inside. And so the album, I think all of Daft Punk's music kind of lends itself towards some form of visual representation, because they're always kind of gesturing towards this futuristic milieu. And that totally works for this movie, where they just kind of create a anime sci-fi story that goes along with this album that felt futuristic in 2000 and still feels futuristic now, just because of Daft Punk's forward thinkingness and unwillingness to sound like anybody else. Even when they are paying homage to genres that influenced them, like disco, or like deep house or whatever, they're always doing it in their own way. Like they were not really chasing a trend or even really starting a trend. They're just Daft Punk. They do what they do. And so it always feels a little bit ahead of its time, I guess. So yeah, I mean, the sci-fi feeling works for me here.
Mm-hmm. I also think that like there's a real tendency among like if you're trying to do like a concept record, like science fiction is really alluring, not because it presents like the tradition of sci-fi presents so many like interesting opportunities. Like there's always like the allegorical stuff, you know. I think about like, you know, what Janelle Monáe has done with like kind of using the like Metropolis suites and that sort of thing. But also like, because sci-fi can be ideas based to such a heavy degree, it frees up the like narrative elements of it. Because I think a lot of sci-fi, you know, whether it's musical or not, you know, really skates by on visuals plus ideas more so than plot. And that's obviously not true of like all sci-fi, but like it. Andrew, is your room haunted? Your door keeps opening and closing.
Jesse keeps coming in and asking for stuff. Sorry.
I can never see her though. She's in the shadows.
She did a really good job crouching down in the shadows.
Yeah, she was doing some crouching action. I was trying to wave at her.
This is like a Paranormal Activity video.
That's right. Thank you for looking out for me, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was worried about the poltergeist getting you. Anyway, I think that sci-fi is such a malleable format as far as like how you can present those ideas, that it's really alluring for musicians to go to that if you have like conceptual aims, just because of the ability to communicate ideas in kind of more abstract ways than, you know, maybe like, you know, traditional human drama necessitates.
So we're gonna cap this series off in 2 weeks with the Lemonade film, which is probably the best film or the best, like, I don't know, piece of video art that we're looking at for this whole series. But I guess one thing I'm kind of struck by is like how many of the things that Lemonade does that were actually done here first, you know. And I'm not really sure if there are like antecedents to this, you know. Is there another album that got the feature film? Oh, I guess The Wall, right?
Yeah, The Wall. And then Tommy and Quadrophenia were both adapted later on into film.
But those are both like, is it all music all the way through? Or I assumed, I haven't actually seen those movies. I thought that they had like traditional dramatic scenes as well.
They might. I've not actually seen those movies either, but I just know that they exist.
Yeah,
it's Ken Russell, so who knows? So it's a real wild card.
Wait, did Ken Russell make all of those?
Not The Wall, but the other two he did. Gotcha. The Wall is basically wall-to-wall music, though, to the point where they add music that isn't on the album because they have to. Like The Wall is only like 70-something minutes, but
right, and it was also like imagined as a stage show as well.
Right. The Wall has some really sick animation. You know, while we're talking about like animation and music, like, and
yeah, I guess The Wall is like the predecessor of this movie.
I really wish that would happen more, because a bunch of the visual albums that I can think of are live action. You know, there's like the Dirty Computer, and then Lemonade and all that. But I really like the idea of having a like 100% an animated album, which I think is just such a cool idea.
This is not animation, but I remember there were rumblings a couple of years back that Lucretia Martel was making something with Bjork. And
I would give up animation if I could see that.
I think Bjork is another artist who has like such a refined sense of like visual aesthetic to accompany her music. Where is the Bjork feature film? I know we got Dance in the Dark. Dance in the Dark is great. Oh, is there a
Utopia ended up? No, but I think it was one of these like visual albums where there was a music video for every song. And those are like kind of her like whole like post-human project where like, you know, she was kind of manipulating her body with CG and stuff like that. they're pretty interesting videos. I think that one has a music video for every song. She also has the app for biophilia.
Yeah, biophilia had an app. That's right.
So
yes, I
maybe
basically
the arc has transcended cinema.
Ultimately, fundamentally what I'm saying is that I agree. I think that like there should be more feature film adaptations of albums, except you, Luca Guadagnino, and your Blood on the Tracks film. Get out of here with that. I don't give a shit.
Well, we still have the Bjork as like the Icelandic witch, like Scandinavian witch, in the upcoming Viking film from
Robert Egger.
Robert Egger. Maybe it's a stealth. Maybe it's a stealth like a Volnicura visual album or something like that.
Please. Let's just go back to Vespertine. Let's just make a Vespertine movie.
Yeah.
I don't care if that album's been out for 20-something years. I want a Vespertine movie.
Do it.
All right. Well, if you would like to watch Interstella, it is available on YouTube.
And archive.org is where I watched it, which I think might be slightly better quality than YouTube.
What the YouTube is 360p, which is not great. What is Archive better than that?
They don't give you a pixel count, unfortunately. So
it's just a surprise.
I will say that like this movie is super hard to watch. Otherwise, there was a Blu-ray release a while back that is now out of print that you can't get. It's not on any streaming services except one super obscure one. You have to like pay for you have to get a trial for. I may have single-handedly gotten Central Cinema to book this movie. Who knows if it's going to happen? But I tweeted to them and they said they were going to look into it. So, if you live in Knoxville, be on the lookout for a Andrew Swafford provided screening of Interstella 5555.
Yeah, tweet Central Cinema, like be like the fans in
right.
This is our Snyder cut. Is
release the Interstella 555.
Once you're done dogpiling that guy who wrote the Elvira review, then you need to dogpile Central Cinema on social media and make them book Interstella, because I want to see this movie in HD on the big screen with a nice like bump-in sound system.
What's their what is it? Their Twitter? What are
it's at Cinema Knox. Oh man, we're
just gonna turn we're gonna turn Cinematary into like an activist podcast where we just have like a call to action at the end of every one.
Where we bully Lights Camera Jackson off the internet, and we demand screenings from Central Cinema.
Still working on that first one.
Yeah,
Still
I know.
Working on that first one.
Hashtag Lights Camera, get out of here.
Get out of here. Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter, where you're going to be bullying Central Cinema, and Instagram at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Also, patreon.com/Cinematary, where you can watch this live while we're doing this whole thing. Thank you to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Christina Daughtry, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Maggie, Michael Anthony Gonzalez, Ron Hayes, Titus Arthur, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we're going to take a quick pause on the music video series to celebrate 350 episodes. And we'll have our little special episode, and we're not going to talk about it until we get there because it's a nice surprise.
You don't want to reveal? Okay.
No, it's a nice surprise. You can
it's different. It's different than the other anniversary episodes.
He's afraid that people won't show up for what we're going to do.
I am afraid of that every week.
Well,
dang.
It's not so much a fear as more of an acceptance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We've moved on to the final stage of grief.
But after that, we will be concluding our music video series with Lemonade. So it should be a good one. Until then, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, live streamers.